What's going on, team? It's Coach Troy, and today we are going to be diving into Chapter 1 of the CSCS textbook. It is the 7th edition of the Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, and we're going to be talking about the structure and function, the foundational systems that actually make the movement happen, and that is going to be our muscular system, the neuromuscular connection, and the skeletal system. This is everything you need to understand how athletes move, train, and how they get strong, man. So we're going to be delving into this. These are just my notes. I'm studying for my CSCS as well, so hopefully we're all going to pass this exam sooner than later together, and we will be some new subject matter experts of strength and conditioning. So first section we're going to go over is going to be our muscular system, and we're going to start from the macro to the micro breakdown of the muscular system, guys. So let's take it from the outside. Let's take it all the way from the outside in, right? So when we think about the muscle, let's think about the skeletal muscle, and it's going to be surrounded by a connective tissue layer, and that's going to be the epimysium. Whenever we think about this, I try to tell people, if you've ever seen a piece of chicken, you tear the skin off that first layer, that white sheath. Let's think of that, and that if you're looking at a chicken breast, and that the muscle tissue, the breast, is going to be covered in that sheath, that's going to be the epimysium. Then if you were to rip apart that muscle or that chicken, that piece of chicken, within that is going to be the muscle fascicles, and that's just going to be bundles of muscle fibers together, right? And fascicles is just another word back in like ancient times. A bundle of sticks look like a bundle of sticks, all of the muscle fibers running along together, so they're wrapped in this perimysium. So you have the big muscle belly, then within it you have a whole bunch of fascicles that are wrapped together, covered in a perimysium, and then even within there, inside of each fascicle, are individual muscle fiber cells. Each one is going to be surrounded by what we know as the endomysium. All right, so each muscle fiber has what do you think it has? Well, let's go over it. It has a multiple myofibrils, and these are going to be the long strands running the length of the muscle fibers, right? This is going to be long strands running the length of the muscle fiber. Inside those myofibrils, you're going to have sarcomeres, and these are going to be the basic contractile unit of a muscle. You have sarcomere endpoints, and that's what we're about to break down, the structure of a sarcomere. So sarcomeres are made up of those myofibrils. Those are going to be actin and myosin filaments. These are proteins. So actin and myosin filaments. This is where the action happens, all right? So action potential starts to get recruited, and we're going to go over this entire breakdown, all right? But first and foremost, we need to know what the key zones and bands are within this sarcomere structure. All right, so you have one portion of the sarcomere that is considered to be the Z line or Z disc. And these borders of each, the borders of each of these are on the edge of the sarcomere, right? This is the border of each sarcomere are your Z lines. They're going to be on the width, on the widest portion. Then within that Z line, you're going to have H zones. And these H zones are the center of the sarcomere. And this is only where the myosin is going to be located. Okay, so we have the border and the border, and then within that area, we're going to have the sarcomere, the H zone. And this is only going to have myosin that are going to have their globular heads. The myosin is only going to be in this area. Another section that we're going to have within this sarcomere is going to be our M line. And that M line is the middle line of the H zone. So when we had our sarcomere here, we had our H zone in here, and then there's a line that's going to be right here. That's going to be the middle of that H zone. And this is what's going to hold the myosin in place, right? Those globular heads that we were just speaking upon. So that's where the M line is. The M line is the middle line of the H zone, and this holds the myosin in place. As far as our A band is going to be the full length of the myosin, right? The full length of the myosin, and this overlaps plus central region. So it overlaps. It's going to be overlapping. So when you guys are looking at your books and you see that A band is going to be the full length of the myosin, and then they start to overlap, all right? And lastly, that we're going to discuss in there is going to be the I band, because we can't leave out the actin, right? We've been talking about the myosin so much, but we have to have the other protein, and that other protein is our actin. So we have our H zone, our Z lines, that's where our sarcomere is going to be. H zone is where the myosin only is going to be. Our I band is going to be just where the actin is, man. And they do not overlap. Okay, so you have your A band where the myosin is, and that can overlap each other, but the actin does not overlap, all right? So one thing I do want you to remember is when a muscle contracts, the H zones and the I bands are gonna shrink. The H zones and the I bands are gonna shrink, right? We're contracting, we're gonna shrink, they're gonna get smaller. But the A band stays the same. And that is because myosin doesn't shorten. It just pulls the actin forward, right? So the globular head doesn't shorten. It's just gonna be down here pulling the actin forward, but it's not moving. It's just pulling it forward as the actin is going forward. So I hope my little weird depiction just there with my arm was help you with some actin. I mean, understanding that the actin is getting pulled forward and shortening, where the globular head is just grabbing and then power stroking forward. All right. So with that being said, once we start talking about that power stroke, we might as well just slide right into the sliding filament theory. All right. And this is how muscles contract when we think about the sliding filament theory. Muscle contraction happens when the myosin heads attach to the actin and they pull, just like rowing a boat, right? So grab and pull, and this is powered by what we call ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. This is powered by adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. If you're in the strength and conditioning world, you'll know this as ATP, action potential. Once this action potential happens, calcium is then released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, or SR, and this is going to bind to the troponin. The troponin is going to move, the troponin then moves tropomyosin, and this is going to expose the actin binding sites, and this is how the myosin is able to grab and pull and attach to the actin. So as you see, the actin has these I like to say shields or body armor all over it, and it needs to have the tropomyosin and stuff moved and exposed. So that's what goes on in that cycle. Without ATP, there is not going to be any release. Okay, without action potential, there's going to be no release, and that is going to be cramping and stiffness, aka rigor mortis. So that's kind of when people are, you know, dead. You hear about rigor mortis. Without action potential, so it just becomes a muscle locked up. So then from there, if we're talking about muscles locking up, we have to understand that we have different types of muscle fibers. Okay, and there are 3 different types of muscle fibers that we have. Type 1 is going to be our slow twitch. Type 1 is our slow twitch muscle fiber. It is fatigue resistant. Remember that if you're thinking about your tests. I'm pretty sure this is something that is very, very, very test worthy. Type 1 slow twitch is fatigue resistant, endurance based, in small motor units. All right. So what does that mean? What type of athlete are we thinking about? Long, slow distance type of thing. It's fatigue resistant. It does not get fatigued fast, quickly, right? It's endurance based. It's going to be people that are doing marathons, people that are doing things that are outside of that 3 to 5 minute threshold, right? When we're outside of glycolysis, when we're in, think of people that are in oxidative states. That is not going to be your Usain Bolts. That is not going to be your Noah Lyles. That is not going to be your Tiana Dang. That's not going to be your sprinters, your Olympic weightlifters who are moving fast. All right, so slow twitch, think fatigue resistant, right? Mitochondria dense. When we think type 2 fast twitch, oxidative, right? Type 2A, fast twitch oxidative, moderate power, and fatigue resistant. It's that middle. I like to call this my decent CrossFitters. You know, they can still get into that sprint race like a Matt Frazier, Noah Olsen, they can Rich Froning. They can still get out, Tia Claire, and do a dead fast sprint, but they also can go and do we had 3 hours on the 30,000 meters on the row machine. They can go and do a triathlon, you know, and still be able to run the side of a mountain, but then come back and snatch very quickly and abruptly. So this is that fast twitch, oxidative, moderate power, fatigue resistant individual. And then we're going to jump into our type 2X, fast twitch, glycolytic, right? Glycolytic, my bad on that. High power, fast fatiguing. They're going to get fatigued super fast, you know, not really trying to do anything over that minute, 60 seconds, 40. That 400 meter dash or sprint is going to be the longevity of them. Anything under 2 minutes is their space, their wheelhouse. You can see somewhat these new age 800 meter sprinters are playing that game. But fast fatigue used in sprinting and weightlifting, yes, for sure. Athlete examples, like we spoke upon, marathon runner is going to be type 1 dominant. Sprinter or power lifter is going to be type 2 dominant. All right. Olympic weightlifter as well, I'd like to say. It's going to be type 2 dominant. So let's jump into section 2. I kind of covered that muscular system. Let's jump into section 2 of our neuromuscular system. So the neuromuscular system, motor unit, man, we got to think about that motor unit. And then what is a motor unit? What do we think a motor unit is? A motor unit, one motor unit or one motor neuron plus all the muscle fibers it innervates. A motor unit is equal to one motor neuron plus all the muscle fibers that it innervates. So if you ever see a motor unit, you'll see this neuron, right? And it's like my hand is the neuron, and then it has all of these different, or it's the motor unit, and then it kind of has these different little attachments like a octopus, and it attaches to all of these different muscle fibers that it innervates, right? And that's what we're speaking upon. So the more motor units, the more strength that you're going to have. So you want to recruit more motor units so that it can innervate more muscle fibers, and then you can be stronger and activate more powers, right? Basically. Smaller motor units are going to be things that are going to be finely controlled. That's going to be like your eyes and your fingers. Larger motor units are going to be powerful, very strong. It's going to be your glutes, your quads. That's your large motor units. It's going to be a lot of them, all right? In the early stages of training, most of your gains in the early, this is what I tell all my clients, man. This is the biggest portion of like the first 6 months to a year and a half of training is going to be neuromuscular facilitation adaptations more than anything. You're not necessarily getting that much stronger, but what you are piecing together is how to create the right kinetic chain, the kinetic process. You know, you're having functionality occur. You're now able to squat properly. And now that you now know how to squat properly, now you can add the weight that's needed in order to break the tissue down and create the stressors that we need for adaptation. So that's where we are with that. So then that's what I tell everybody. It's better muscular recruitment, not necessarily more muscles yet. So that first 6 months to a year is just a whole bunch of neuromuscular transmission that is happening, efficiency that is happening right there. Now we have our neuromuscular junction. And that is the point where the motor neuron is going to meet a muscle fiber, right? So the motor neuron is going to meet that muscle fiber, and that is the neuromuscular junction. Acetylcholine, ACH, is the neurotransmitter that is going to get released, and that is going to trigger muscle contraction, right? So once this happened, acetylcholine is then released, and then we're going to be like, hey, muscle contraction needs to occur. Like a spark plug that starts an engine, right? That is exactly what acetylcholine is, and that is what the neuromuscular conjunction is, similar to a spark plug that is going to start the engine. Pretty self-explanatory to a degree. Proprioceptors. I like to talk about proprioception in my gym a lot, and often we talk about the body's awareness, proprioception, the body's awareness, to know where it is in space without having to see it, right? Your body's internal GPS. Muscle spindles. I love talking about muscle spindles and GTOs because it's your body's natural safety mechanisms. So your muscle spindles are there. They're going to detect the change. They detect change in length and rate of stretching. That is what muscle spindles do. They are going to detect change in length and rate of stretching. When the muscle is stretched too fast, it is going to trigger a contraction back, right? Example, whenever you guys are thinking about when the doctor taps your knee, boom, and then you kick out, that's muscle spindles reacting. Right, that is exactly what muscle spindles reacting is right there. When the doctor taps your knee, boom, and you kick out, that is the muscle spindles reacting. Now your GTOs are a cool thing because it's your body's safety mechanism. Your GTOs are located in the tendons, and they detect tension. And if they detect too much force or tension is being generated, the GTOs are going to trigger inhibition, and that is just there to prevent injury. So it's like when you're in the middle of that bench and you're struggling, and that joint is starting to, the potential of tearing your pec is there. And especially in the very beginning stages, your body won't allow you to overcome that as much, and it'll just, relax and say, man, I missed that lift. And that's your body's safety mechanism. So don't be upset when you can't get that. Hopefully you're creating a stressor, and your body's going to return and hopefully adapt and overcome that. But when GTOs override those muscle spindles that are trying to fire off, that's your body's natural mechanism so that we don't hurt ourselves. So allow that to happen. Overtime heavy lifting can decrease GTO sensitivity though. So that's what I'm saying, in the beginning stages of lifting, that's something that happens, but over time your body is going to have a decrease in that GTO sensitivity, which allows more force production, and that's how we stimulate the adaptations that are needed in order to keep growing once we're past certain normalcies of the body. And you'll see or hear bigger guys, tearing their pecs still, because it kind of gets desensitized the more and more you lift, because your body's like, well, hey, he's been stressing me out and we've overcome it, and he knows the point, but sometimes we may overdo it, right? Section 3 is going to be the skeletal system. And in this system, we have two main sections, right? We all know we have two sections. We have our axial skeleton and our appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is going to be our skull, right? Our skull is going to be attached to our vertebral column, and our vertebral column is going to be attached to our ribs. So basically, I like to say all of our our essential items, right? Our brain, our spinal cord, and that's going to be innervative to our nerve endings and protection of our organs and our lungs, with our rib cage. So appendicular skeleton is going to be your limbs, your pelvis, and your shoulder girdle. Not that they're not important, but we're definitely axial skeleton is of a high regard, I like to say. So when we think about that, so just when you're thinking about how many sections the body is breaking down into, I know that's a very big question that they ask, and what parts, like knowing that it's the skull, vertebral column, and the ribs for axial, and appendicular is going to be your limbs, your pelvis, and your shoulder girdle. And once we're talking about skeletal systems, we can't leave out what our bones do for us. So our bones are going to provide support and leverage for movement, right? Joints, muscles make joints occur, joints make leverage, and our kinetic chain happen. It makes movement happen. They're a big team. It all has to happen together. it's a pulley system. Our bodies is just set up as a pulley system. You know, muscles and bones attached with ligaments and tendons are just helping us chug along and be kinetic. So it's also a barrier, right? It's also going to be functioning as a protector. So our bones, like I just said, our rib cage is going to protect our organs. Our bones also are a storage spot for minerals. Just think your calcium, phosphorus are going to be stored in your bones and get released through that. Just think of how important it is, or how at a disadvantage you are when you start to have things like osteoporosis and brittle bone disease and all different things that come with osteopenia and every one of your osteo dysfunctions. Quality of living diminishes once bone function is at a disadvantage or at a lessened state. So take care of our bones. How do we do that? We do strength and conditioning. We load our central nervous system up. We create adaptations. We create rigor on the bones to create more density, to create more wherewithal with our athletes so that they can function at a high level. So let's not forget that. Bone marrow is going to be producing red blood cells for oxygen. We need that. We need all of this. So we need to strengthen our athletes to have good healthy bones, so that bone marrow is producing good red blood cells, so that their oxygen consumption is at a high rate. Most of our athletes are going to need good VO2 maxes. So it all blends together, team. Let's never leave one portion out. You know, each hand is washing, helping out in this whole thing. So within the bone structures, we also have bone and joint classifications, okay? So we have our fibrous bones or joints, and those, think of the sutures in your head, right? So when you think of a baby, or you even see like on my do-rag, it would be like a suture here. We have different sections. Now these they're joints, you know, but they're immovable, so they can't move. They're fibrous. They've now glued together basically. So this is like your skull. And then you have cartilaginous, cartilage. I don't know why I'm struggling with that word today. Cartilaginous? Whatever. You figure it out. Correct me. Somebody write in the chat, where, you know, in the comments, break it down for me a little bit easier. I used to be able to say that. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, these are slightly movable. Think the disc between your vertebrae, because it has cartilage in it, right? So the cartilage, knees sometimes, but cartilage in it is gonna allow that joint to be movable. So slightly movable discs between your vertebrae are gonna be your cartilaginous joints. Got it together by the end. And your synovial joints, these are going to be freely movable joints. Your knees, your hips, your shoulders, all right? Synovial, think synovial fluid. It's going to help with the movement. Very, very, very movable freely, all right? So when we're thinking about synovial joints, what are they going to be surrounded by? The joints, joint capsule, synovial fluid, which is going to reduce friction, and it is going to lubricate that joint. And these are going to be supported by ligaments and tendons. So that's what synovial joints are going to be surrounded by. A capsule normally, right? And most strength training is going to be focused on and around synovial joints, right? Shoulders, hips, knees, all of those different things. So we got a joint capsule, fluid's going to be there. It's going to help with reduction of friction, but if the fluid is missing, we got to help and aid with things. So as a strength and conditioning coach, you just need to make sure that you really focus on aiding with prehab for mobility and joint health. So yeah. So just some key takeaways from this chapter I'd like to help you guys with. Just know that structure equals function. You can't program like a pro unless you understand how the muscles and bones and nerves all work together. So kind of the things that we were breaking down, understanding that it is one big conglomerate. It's all a team working together. And that muscle forces come from the sarcomere level. So from the molecular or microscopic level, and understanding that contractions and understanding that contractions equal performance. So the more contractions we can have, the more than likely the better performance that you're going to be able to do in sport. We need to also know that we need to train the brain, and understanding that training the brain is the first adaptation in strength and conditioning. The neuromuscular control separates good from great athletes. So being able to have that athlete have some amazing form of mind muscle memory is what we're really trying to get our athletes at a high level to have. Joint health is going to be longevity, right? We all know that injuries come, but if we can keep these joints, this is where the looseness or the less stableness of the body is in joints. And if we can keep our joints healthy and sturdy, man, we can perform as athletes for a very long time. So we have to protect those synovial joints, team. Yeah, so that's chapter 1. I hope that you guys can learn from something from that, and those are my notes. And chapter 2 is up next. We'll be going over bioenergetics tomorrow, and we will crush that one too, y'all. So look over this. Hopefully it taught you something. You guys learned something. We were able to pick up some ideas together, and this is another day into our 24 days of CSCS. Catch me next time.